Welcome back to my channel. My name is Stacey Flowers and I'm engaged and I want to talk about it. I specifically want to talk about the 5 things that I didn't expect after getting engaged. So if you're interested in that, please keep watching. So I'm engaged. This is exciting. I am getting married. This is exciting. In addition to it being exciting, in addition to it being like all these wonderful things, there's so many things that I just didn't expect would show up, or how I would feel, or like what would happen after getting engaged. There's just no way for me to be able to expect these things. And I want to talk about it because I do think that I will likely do a lot of processing about engagement and wedding planning and maybe a little bit of marriage stuff. I don't know. Here on my channel, because you guys know I heal so well through talking out loud. That said, I want to talk about 5 specific things, and maybe that'll make it a little bit easier for me to just talk about all the other things. But so let me just dive into it, because I think I'm going to get too nervous and then it's going to turn into something else. So the first thing that I didn't expect about getting engaged is that not everything, but a lot of things really do change. Like, there is an actual shift emotionally, there's a shift mentally, there's a shift spiritually, there's a shift financially. There's like a actual change that happens when you go from girlfriend to fiance. And I think that should be obvious that, like, oh yeah, something's gonna change, something's gonna be different. Like, you have taken this big step. But my engagement was private, right? Like, it was a very private, intimate engagement. And I think I just assumed that the people who felt that sudden big change is because they had public engagements where either immediately all their family and friends knew, or at least the strangers who were in the public space knew. But to have an intimate, private engagement proposal and still feel the shift of, like, I am no longer a girlfriend, I'm a fiance now, really, really blew my mind. To feel the shift of, like, intentions in terms of my life and the level in which I would be considering another person, which I already consider when he was my boyfriend, I already consider him a lot. I already love him a lot. I already all those things. But there was literally like something that went off in my brain. And this is how I described it to my friends, where like my mind just exploded. And I was like, or maybe not exploded, but like all the thoughts that I had before getting engaged, like I said yes. And then everything shifted into this other stratosphere. And I'm like, what's happening? Like why? Like we're like nothing, like this moment to this moment, physically nothing has changed in our environment. This moment to the only thing that has changed in this moment is our declared intentions. Because that's the other thing. We have talked about getting married. We have talked about like getting engaged. We've talked about all of these things, but once it actually happens, there is a very specific shift. And it makes me think about how my mom has always said to me that when a man proposes, like, you're not supposed to be surprised that he proposes. You're only supposed to be surprised how he proposes. And when it happened, I think that it suddenly made that statement make so much more sense, right? Because I cannot imagine being surprised how he proposed and that he proposed at all, in the sense of like never having had any conversation around getting married or getting engaged or wanting to spend the rest of my life with someone, and they propose. Like, if we hadn't like had the sit down, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Like, very serious, you're gonna be my forever one day. Like, if we hadn't had any of those conversations, I think my response, on top of this felt sense of everything has shifted, would have taken me out. Like, I just don't think I would have been somebody who would have been able to handle it. So all that to say, that's something that I didn't expect, is that even though nothing physically changed, that spiritual, emotional, mental, intellectual, even like physically, like if I think about how we interact with each other physically, like we joke about, I was like, oh, things feel a little different now. But I wonder if it's because it's just the effect of the change everywhere else. So that's the first thing that I didn't expect after getting engaged, is that there is a very real shift. The thing that I didn't expect is how emotional I am, but also the emotional responses of my family and friends. And so this is kind of like 1 and 2. So I know that I'm the type of person, and my fiance knows I'm the type of person who needs time to process. So when he talked about why he proposed the way he proposed, and when we initially like got engaged and we were kind of like talking about it, and I was just like, I think I need this, and I think I need this, and what do you think about this? He was just like, yeah, I already know you need your time to process. I already know. And I was like, so you already thought about that? And he's like, yeah, I already thought about that. And so when I think about it from that perspective, like, I am an incredibly emotional person, like deeply emotional, like probably 90% of the way that I experience the world is through my emotions. Even though I'm intellectual, and even though I'm smart and, strategic and all those other things that work for me in business, who I am through and through, who I am on the inside is a deeply emotional person. And it's amazing to have a fiance who knew that and like built that into my experience in terms of processing getting engaged. So that's like the second thing, is like, I already knew I was emotional, but like I did not expect to be this emotional about getting engaged. And so there was an initial emotional response, and my fiance was like very, very soothing and comforting around that. And then I had another emotional response when I was telling my friends and family, and then another big emotional response when I was even sharing on social media, which surprised me. Like I'm like, oh, okay, my emotions of excitement, my emotions of, eagerness, but like the tears, I was like, what? Like why am I, like, songs sound different to me now. Like I don't even, I love Beyonce, but I don't even care for music like that. And I put like a song over the photo that I announced on Instagram with, and I started crying. And I've used this song on another reel. Do you think I cried when I used it on that? No. But I post a picture of like us holding hands in my ring, and I'm like, what is it? Are these, like, I'm crying. So I just didn't expect for how emotional, or the level of emotional intensity that it would increase to. And then the third one is the actual emotional responses of my friends and family when I called some of them. I would say half of my family and friends, like instantly, like some of them, like the screen, like I had the FaceTime screen where they just saw the ring. Some of them I was like this, where they saw it. And like when I say instant tears, like instant tears flowed from their eyes. And everybody was just, I mean, obviously everybody is like excited and supportive and, all of these different things. But to know that something happening in my life can cause that kind of an emotional response in other people's lives. And I get like crying at a wedding. I get, maybe crying because you heard him say something to me, or you heard me say something to him. But seeing so many people cry upon seeing the ring, or seeing me with a ring on, that was unexpected. Like I didn't expect to have so many people have such a emotion-filled response about something happening in my life. And a lot of the conversation around it was my friends and loved ones saying, I'm just so happy for you, and you deserve this, and he's such a good guy, or he's perfect for you, like just different things like that. Or even having so many of my friends be like, I knew it, I knew it was either gonna be this or it was gonna be this. Like, so to know that I have made it very, very clear how I feel about this person, and he's obviously made it very clear about how he feels about me, to the point where no one in my friend group or in my family was surprised. Like everyone was like, yep, including my son. Like, and his response probably had me the most emotional, just because, it's my son. And I think about how this is going to affect his life. And, he had a like anxious, sort of nervous response initially. So he was like rambling when we were like talking about it. And then he kind of like calmed down. And then, he was a lot more emotional because his mom is getting married. And I don't know, that was just something that I didn't expect, for people to have as much emotion about my engagement this early on in the whole engagement, wedding, marriage process, is that I'm emotional, they're emotional. Fourth thing that I didn't expect is that how much me and my fiance would enjoy being engaged. Like we are over here kikiing about it. Like the first time he was like, okay, fiance. And I was like, like the first time he called me fiance, like just giggling, like it really, like your relationship doesn't start over, but for some reason it feels like there's like a renewal of it. There's this renewed thing. So a lot of the similar feelings that I felt at the beginning of our relationship, where I was just giddy and like, oh my gosh, and I like, oh, he called, like all of that has returned, and like we're just really enjoying it. So the way that we refer to each other a lot now is like, okay, fiance, all right, fiance. Ooh, that's because I'm a fiance. Or, you know, like there's just a lot of play and there's just a lot of fun. And so we're enjoying the play and fun part, but also noticing how much we're enjoying the practical part of it too. So coming up with the wedding date, like I understand why people say wedding planning is stressful. I totally get it. And I am going to do what I can to make sure that my wedding planning is not stressful. But I understand why people say it's stressful. But what I'm really enjoying is that between me and my fiance, we are not stressed. Like when one of the first things that we did is start to map out the guest list, and he was just like, oh, and like what we wanted the guest count to be. He was like, oh, I don't anticipate that I'm gonna have a lot of people on my guest list. And so he just started to like shoot off names. And so I started to like write them down. And then as, you know, days or whatever went on, when he would say someone's name, I would say, oh, do you think that this person would wanna come to the wedding? Just like throwing it out as conversation. And so every time he says that, I'm capturing the name and like writing it down. So the other day we were like laying in the bed and I was just like, oh, who is this person that you had mentioned? And he was just like, oh, this person. And so then he saw the Excel spreadsheet that I had made where I started to list out our actual wedding list. And he was just like, oh, wow, I didn't even realize that you were doing that. And I'm like, yeah, like, right. And instead of him being like, you know, stressed or frustrated upon seeing an Excel spreadsheet, he was just like, that's neat. Like, that's lovely. Like, that's wonderful. It's like, it's crazy. It's amazing that you did this thing. And so we're having very much a like, these are your strengths and weaknesses. These are my strengths and weaknesses. Not explicitly talking about that, but like they're showing up and we're just engaging with each other on that. And when I say that, so for example, like organizing and structuring things like that, that's a strength that I have. Whereas like with my fiance, like something that he was really helpful on is us deciding what the wedding date was going to be, because I was like all romantic, like, let's get married on the day we met. Let's get married on the day you asked me to be your girlfriend. Like I wanted the romantical wedding date. And my fiance was like, that's fine and dandy, but what about this date over here, right? And he was very much in the pragmatic, and he was very much more practical about it. And that's a strength, right? Like it's a strength of his to say, this is what practically makes sense. If we want to get married, if we want to pay for our wedding, if we want to give you time to process, if we want to go on a honeymoon after, this date doesn't actually set us up for that. And one of the big things about the romantic date versus the date that we're actually going to have of the wedding is that the romantic date is in his busy season. And so even as I was like, oh, but what do you think about this? What do you think about this? He wasn't like frustrated and like, no, we're not doing it. It was just a very easy, simple, you know, we'll think about it kind of a thing. And then when I thought about it, I was like, oh, okay, this date actually does make a lot more sense. And so I say that to say, like, we're really enjoying the being engaged process. There hasn't been a like, now that we're engaged, let's both of us go get stressed out. We are not stressed. We are like giddy teenagers who are getting to see and explore each other for the first time with an awareness that we know that this is going to be forever. So a lot of kissing, a lot of making out, a lot of hugging, a lot of like just wrapping ourselves in one another and just wrapping this intention. Because I think for me, it's one thing to be asked to be for someone to ask you to be married and for you to be their wife. But I would imagine on his side, and maybe we'll do a live where he comes on and talks about his experience. I would imagine on his side, there's an experience of asking someone and them saying yes. Even though we already talked about it, when it happens, it changes things. And so that is the fourth thing that I didn't expect, is that the engagement process would be so enjoyable, because so many people talk about how stressful it is, and that's when them and their partner like started fighting and all these other things. It's like, it's been very seamless for us, and I didn't expect that because everybody said it was not going to be that way, but it's been very seamless. But I also think it's seamless right? Because of his strengths, my strengths, his weaknesses, my weaknesses, there is the way they fit together, and the way we, I don't know what the word would be, consider the other person. So like, for example, the way he chose an intimate proposal, because maybe one of the motivations is because he knew I would need time to process. So while he could have done a public outside in front of other people, that would have put me in a position where my answer wouldn't have changed, but maybe I wouldn't have had the space to be able to process. But him being willing to think through that, like, just, sets us up to be able to like enjoy each other a lot more. And then the last thing that I didn't expect